grave whisper.
I didn't come to the Stanley Hotel looking for ghosts. That's the lie I tell myself now. But back then, I was tired, curious, and quietly desperate for something to shake me awake. The hotel rose out of Estes Park like a relic that refused to decay, its white facade gleaming against the Colorado mountains. Beautiful, too beautiful. The kind of place where silence feels intentional. I checked in just before dusk. The woman at the front desk smiled, but her eyes didn't. She slid the key across the counter and said casually, "You're in 217. She paused, just long enough for me to notice. "Is that a problem?" I asked. Her smile returned, thinner this time. "Some guests request a different room. You didn't." I hadn't known to. The elevator hummed like it was clearing its throat as it carried me upward. Old machinery, slow. Every floor announcement sounded pre-recorded, but warped, like it had been played too many times. When the doors opened on the second floor, the hallway stretched out longer than it should have. Red carpet, cream walls, doors evenly spaced, all shut, all quiet. Room 217 waited at the far end. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of polish and something older beneath it, like fabric stored too long in darkness. The lamps were already on, casting warm yellow light across antique furniture, floral wallpaper, and a large bed that looked untouched, too untouched, like a display. I laughed under my breath. "You're tired, that's all." I unpacked, showered, and ordered room service. By the time I finished eating, night had swallowed the mountains outside my window. The glass reflected the room back at me. For a moment, I thought I saw movement behind my own reflection. I turned. Nothing. At exactly 11:47 p.m., I heard laughter. Not loud, not close. Children. It drifted through the hallway, barefoot footsteps running, giggling, stopping suddenly, then starting again. I opened my door and leaned out. The hall was empty. No footsteps, no echoes. When I closed the door, the laughter stopped instantly, like a switch had been flipped. I slept badly. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of breathing. Slow, steady, not mine. I lay frozen, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each inhale. It was coming near the foot of the bed, too close, human close. I reached for the lamp and clicked it on. The room was empty, but the indentation at the foot of the bed remained, like someone had just stood up. The mattress slowly lifted back into place. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I sat there, heart hammering, trying to convince myself that old buildings settle, that sleep paralysis explains everything, that fear invents details. Then the bathroom light turned on by itself. I stared at the open bathroom door as warm light spilled across the carpet. "I didn't touch it," I whispered to no one. Steam began to seep out from the bathroom, curling low along the floor. I smelled soap, floral, old-fashioned, the kind my grandmother used to keep wrapped in paper. A woman's voice hummed softly. Not a song I recognized, just a melody,
low and patient, like she had all the time in the world. I stood. Every instinct screamed at me not to go in there, but curiosity is a quiet killer. I took one step toward the bathroom, then another. The humming stopped the moment I reached the doorway. The mirror was fogged. Words were traced into the steam, not written, pressed as if by fingers on the other side of the glass. Stay. The bathroom door slammed shut. The lights went out, and something knocked, once, from inside the mirror. That was my first night in room 217, and it was the last night I ever slept alone in that hotel.
I didn't leave the room that night. I sat on the edge of the bed until morning, lights on, jacket still zipped, phone clutched in my hand like it might decide to work as a weapon if things got worse. Nothing else happened after the knock in the mirror, but the silence that followed was worse than noise. It felt watched, like the room was waiting for me to blink. At dawn, sunlight crept through the curtains, and with it came embarrassment. Fear doesn't age well in daylight. By the time the mountains glowed gold outside my window, I'd convinced myself I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Travel fatigue, altitude sickness, an overactive imagination fueled by reputation. I showered quickly. The water was already warm when I turned the handle. It should have bothered me more than it did. Downstairs, the hotel buzzed with polite normalcy. Tourists laughed softly. Coffee cups clinked. A man argued cheerfully about pancakes. I almost smiled, almost believed I'd survived a bad dream. I approached the front desk. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Is there anything special about room 217? The clerk was different from the woman the night before. Older, gray hair pulled tight. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked past me toward the staircase. Then she sighed. "You slept there?" she asked. "Yes." Her eyes met mine. "Then you already know." I waited. "Room 217, she continued, lowering her voice, was the site of an explosion in 1911. A gas lantern. A woman named Elizabeth Wilson was badly burned. She survived, but people say she never really left." I forced a laugh. "People say a lot of things." "Yes," she agreed, "they do." She slid a brochure across the counter, not a ghost tour pamphlet, but a thin historical booklet. A photograph slipped out and landed face up between us. A woman stood in front of the Stanley Hotel. Long dress, hair pinned tight, expression severe. Her eyes looked wrong. Not dead, not alive, waiting. "That's her," the clerk said. "Elizabeth Wilson." My mouth drew dry. Why didn't anyone tell me? She studied me carefully. "You didn't ask." I returned to my room with the photo folded in my pocket, heavier than paper should be. The hallway felt different in daylight, shorter, safer. But when I reached room 217, the door was slightly open. I was sure I'd locked it. Inside, the room looked adjusted. My suitcase was neatly closed. The bed was made tighter than housekeeping ever bothers with. On the nightstand sat a bar of floral soap, still wrapped in thin paper. I hadn't brought soap. I backed out into the hallway and knocked on the door across from mine. No answer. Another door. Still nothing. The hallway swallowed sound again, stretching longer the farther I walked. When I returned, the door to 217 was fully open. The bathroom light was on. I didn't go in. I grabbed my keys and left the room, telling myself I'd talk to management, switch rooms, get a refund, anything. But as I stepped into the stairwell, I heard a voice behind me. "You forgot something." A woman's voice, close, calm. I turned. No one stood there, but the soap lay at my feet. The paper had been unwrapped. That night, I stayed because terror does strange math, and by then, leaving felt more dangerous than staying. I pushed a chair under the door handle and sat on the bed with my back to the wall. At 2:17 a.m., the temperature dropped. My breath fogged the air. The bathroom door creaked open, inch by inch. Steam rolled out again, thicker this time, crawling across the carpet like it knew where I was sitting. Then I heard footsteps, bare, slow. They stopped in front of me. The mattress dipped beside my thigh. I didn't look. I couldn't. Her voice came from my left ear. "You're in my room." The air smelled of soap and smoke. "I take care of things here," she whispered. "Guests forget. I remind them." The mattress shifted again, as if she stood. When I finally dared to look, the room was empty, except for the mirror. This time, the message was longer. "Do not leave me." The chair under the door slid just slightly, and somewhere in the hotel, a child laughed.
I didn't sleep. I lay there until dawn, staring at the chair wedged under the door handle, watching it like it might move again if I blinked too long. When morning finally came, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like a pause, like whatever lived in Room-217 simply stepped back into the shadows to let the day pretend everything was normal. I avoided the mirror. I packed without looking at my reflection, shoved the soap into the trash, and left the room with my head down. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. No maids, no guests, just the soft hum of electricity behind the walls. I told myself I was leaving the hotel for good. I made it halfway down the corridor when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, careful, behind me. I turned quickly. The hallway was empty, but longer than it had been before. The exit sign that should have been 20 feet away now hovered far in the distance, flickering faintly. The carpet pattern stretched unnaturally, repeating itself like a copied image. Then I heard a child whisper, "Come play?" It came from my right, from a side corridor I didn't remember seeing before. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to anchor myself to logic. Old hotels get confusing. Similar hallways, poor lighting. I took one step back toward the exit sign. It moved farther away. That's when panic hit. I turned toward the side corridor instead, not because I wanted to, but because my body chose motion over freezing. The air grew colder with every step. The lights dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again, as if the building were breathing. The corridor ended at a staircase, but the sign beside it made no sense. Floor 4.5. I laughed once, sharp, nervous. "There is no 4.5 floor," I said aloud. The laughter echoed wrong, too many times, overlapping itself. I descended. Each step groaned like it hadn't been used in decades. Halfway down, the temperature dropped so fast my teeth chattered. When I reached the bottom, I wasn't in the Stanley Hotel anymore. Not the one tourists see. The hallway here was narrower. The walls were darker. The carpet was threadbare, stained with shapes I didn't want to identify. Doors lined the hall, unevenly spaced, their numbers scratched out, except one. 217. Again. "No," I whispered. From behind one of the doors, I heard coughing, wet, painful. Then a woman screamed. It cut off abruptly, like someone had covered her mouth. I stepped closer to the door marked 217. The air smelled like smoke, burnt oil, scorched fabric. My hand rose without permission and touched the doorknob. It was warm, too warm. The door swung open. Inside wasn't a hotel room, it was chaos. The walls were blackened, furniture lay upturned, the gas lantern on the wall hissed softly, leaking flame. A woman lay on the floor, her dress charred, skin blistered, eyes wide with agony. Elizabeth Wilson. She looked at me, not through me, not past me, at me. "You left me," she said. "I don't know you," I choked. Her mouth stretched into something like a smile, but it broke apart halfway through. "You stayed. That's what matters." The lantern flared. I staggered backwards, tripping over nothing, falling hard onto carpet that suddenly wasn't burned anymore. The hallway snapped back into shape, clean walls, bright lights, normal doors. I lay there gasping. A man stood over me. "Sir?" I looked up into the concerned face of a hotel employee. Name tag, real smile, normal hallway behind him. "You all right? You were lying here." "What floor is this?" I asked. He frowned. "This is the second floor. There's no stairwell here." He glanced behind him. "Hasn't been one for years." I was escorted back to my room. I protested, I argued, I begged to be moved. They told me the hotel was fully booked. That night, the knocking started again, but this time it wasn't from the mirror. It came from inside the walls. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more, like someone trying to get out. And in the silence between them, Elizabeth whispered, "You saw me now."
I stopped calling it fear after that. Fear implies panic, running, screaming, escape. What settled into me instead was something heavier, a quiet certainty that the hotel had noticed me, that room 217 had accepted me the way a tide accepts a drowning man. I didn't tell anyone about the hallway, or the woman, or the burned room that shouldn't exist. I learned quickly that the Stanley has a way of punishing those who talk. The knocks in the walls continued all night, always in patterns, always deliberate. I counted them the way you count seconds in the dark, anything to stay anchored. When morning came, I felt older, not tired, used. I left my room and went looking for answers. The hotel library sat off the main hall, small and elegant, with tall windows and shelves lined in leather-bound volumes. It smelled of dust and polish and forgotten conversations. A guest book lay open on a reading table, its pages yellowed, corners curled. I didn't plan to touch it. I did anyway. Names filled the pages, written in different inks, different hands, dates going back decades, comments about the views, the service, the quiet. Some entries stopped mid-sentence, some ended in scratches deep enough to tear the paper. A chill crept into my spine. I turned the page. My name was there, perfectly written, fresh ink. The date was tomorrow. I slammed the book shut. You shouldn't read that. I spun around. An elderly man sat in one of the armchairs, hands folded over a cane. I hadn't heard him enter. His eyes were sharp, too sharp for someone his age. "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled faintly. someone who stayed too long. I swallowed. That book, my name, appears early for some, late for others. I demanded to know what he meant. He gestured for me to sit. Against my better judgment, I did. Room-217 binds people, he said quietly. Not always forever, but long enough to leave a mark. You're saying the hotel is alive? No, he corrected. Occupied. He told me about guests who claimed to see things, hear things, feel watched. Most checked out shaken but whole. Others lingered. Their names showed up in records where they shouldn't. Staff remembered them even when they were gone. Rooms adjusted themselves. Objects moved. And Elizabeth? I asked. His fingers tightened on the cane. She was never cruel in life, but fire changes things. Pain teaches patience. She doesn't want to hurt anyone. Then what does she want? He met my eyes. To be remembered. That afternoon, I tried to leave. My car wouldn't start. The valet swore it had been running fine an hour earlier. When I went back inside to call roadside assistance, the front doors refused to open, solid. Fire alarms blared suddenly. Smoke curled through the lobby. Not real smoke, not triggering sprinklers, just enough to make people panic. Staff rushed guests away from the exits, away from outside, back upstairs. That night, the room was different. The temperature was warmer, comfortably so. Lamps glowed softer. The bed looked inviting. On the nightstand sat the guest book, open. Elizabeth stood near the window. She was whole now, dress intact, skin unburned, hair neatly pinned. Only her eyes betrayed her, too old, too tired. You read my stories, she said. I want to leave, I replied. She nodded. So did everyone. The walls sighed. The knocks stopped. You can, if you do one thing. My throat tightened. What? She smiled gently. Stay with me tonight. Just tonight, so I don't have to be alone. The guest book pages fluttered. I saw names I recognized, and one I didn't. Mine, written again. This time, with today's date.
I wish I could tell you I refused her, that I shouted, ran, fought, did something brave. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and nodded. Because when Elizabeth asked me to stay, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like exhaustion, asking for company. And somehow, that was worse. She moved closer, her footsteps soundless against the carpet. The air warmed as she passed, like standing near a fireplace. The scent of soap lingered, clean, comforting, almost intimate. Just until morning, she said. You'll see. The guest book snapped shut on its own. The lamps dimmed. I lay back on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Elizabeth sat in the chair by the window, hands folded, posture perfect. She watched the mountains fade into blackness. I used to love this view, she said softly, before the fire. I didn't respond. The silence stretched, not heavy, not violent, just expectant. At some point, I fell asleep. I dreamed of heat. Not flames, pressure, like being pressed between walls that slowly leaned inward. I heard voices in the distance, calling names, some familiar, some lost to time. Beneath them all was Elizabeth's humming,
steady and patient. I woke to sunlight. For one brief, dangerous moment, I felt relief. Then I saw the date on my phone. 3 days had passed. I sat up too fast, heart racing. The room looked unchanged, but my body felt wrong, stiff, heavy, like I'd been underwater too long. Elizabeth was gone. The guest book lay on the desk again. I opened it with shaking hands. My name appeared on 3 consecutive pages, each date different, each entry longer. The first read simply, "Stayed the night." The second, "Listened." The third, "Belongs." I staggered into the hallway. It was busy. Guests moved freely, chatting, laughing. A child ran past me, chasing her brother. No one looked afraid. No one looked lost. I grabbed a passing employee. "I need to check out, now." She smiled politely. "Of course, sir. Did you enjoy your stay?" "I need my bill." Her smile faltered, just a flicker. She typed something into her computer, frowning. "That's odd," she murmured. "What?" "You already checked out." Cold flooded my chest. "That's not possible." She turned the screen toward me. "Checkout date, 3 days ago." "No," I whispered. "I'm still here." She looked at me strangely. "Are you?" The lobby lights dimmed. Conversations around us slowed, stretched, warped. People's movements dragged like they were moving through syrup. The air thickened. Elizabeth stood at the top of the staircase. She looked disappointed. "You promised," she said. "I stayed," I said desperately. "I did what you asked." "Yes, and you stayed again and again." I backed towards the doors. This time they opened. Cold mountain air rushed in. Elizabeth's voice followed me. "If you leave now, you won't be whole." I stepped outside. The sun burned my eyes. The air felt too real. I sucked it into my lungs like it might disappear. Behind me, the Stanley Hotel stood silent and perfect. My car started instantly. I drove without stopping, didn't look back. I made it home. That's the part that scares people when I tell them this, because leaving didn't fix anything. I still wake up at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of knocking. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. My bathroom mirror fogs even when no water runs. Sometimes there's soap on the sink I don't own. And every once in a while, when I close my eyes, I see the guest book, waiting. Because I didn't escape the Stanley Hotel. I just checked out.
I didn't tell anyone what followed me home. Not my friends, not my family, not the doctor who asked why my hands shook when I tried to hold a cup of coffee. Some things sound insane the moment you say them out loud. Some things only survive in silence. The first night back in my apartment, I slept with every light on. It didn't help. At 2:17 a.m., the knocking came. Not from the walls, from inside the closet. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, staring at the closet door. It trembled slightly with each knock, dust shaking loose from the frame. I grabbed my phone and started recording, not because I thought it would help, but because I needed proof that I wasn't imagining this.
The knocking stopped the moment the camera started. Silence returned. Thick, smug silence. In the morning, the recording showed nothing. No sound, no vibration, just me breathing like I'd run a mile. That was when I noticed the smell. Soap. Floral. Old-fashioned. It clung to my clothes, my sheets, my skin. No matter how many times I washed, it stayed, faint but unmistakable, like a memory refusing to fade. I went back to work, or tried to. Doors at the office stuck when I pushed them, lights flickered when I entered rooms, elevators hesitated on floors that weren't selected. Coworkers asked if I'd lost weight, if I was sleeping, if I was okay. I wasn't. At night, my mirrors fogged on their own. Words appeared, never the same message twice. Stay quiet. You promised. I kept you safe. I covered every mirror in my apartment with sheets. Elizabeth didn't like that. The temperature dropped sharply. Pipes groaned like distant screams. The knocking returned, louder, angrier. From the walls, from the floor, from inside my chest. I started seeing the hotel everywhere. The hallway outside my apartment stretched longer than it should have. The carpet pattern repeated itself wrong. Exit signs drifted farther away the more I needed them. One night, I rode the elevator down to the lobby. The doors opened to red carpet, cream walls, antique lamps. The Stanley Hotel. I stumbled backward as the doors tried to close. "No!" I shouted, jamming my hand between them. The elevator jolted. The doors reopened to my apartment building's lobby. Normal, bright, empty. My reflection in the mirrored wall lagged a second behind my movements. That was when I realized something else. Elizabeth wasn't haunting me. She was anchoring herself to me. I searched for answers online, forums, old articles, archived interviews. Buried in a comment thread from years ago, I found a post written by a former Stanley guest. If she lets you leave, she's not done with you. You become a doorway. My phone buzzed. A notification from an unknown number. Elizabeth Wilson has sent you an invitation. Attached was a photo. My apartment, taken from inside. That night, I heard her clearly for the first time since leaving Colorado. "I don't travel well alone," she said, her voice coming from everywhere at once. "But you do." The walls softened. The room warmed. The scent of smoke mingled with soap. "I don't want this," I whispered. "I didn't want the fire," she replied gently. "We don't always choose what stays with us." A knock echoed. Not 3 times, just once. Heavy, final. And suddenly I understood the guest book. It wasn't a record, it was a map, and my name wasn't the last one written.
I found him buried 3 pages deep in a forgotten forum thread. No username, no profile picture, just a block of text posted 12 years ago, time-stamped at 2:17 a.m. If you're reading this, she's already with you. The words hit harder than anything I'd read so far. He wrote about Room-217, about the soap, the warmth, the way the hotel rearranged itself when you weren't paying attention.
He wrote about leaving and how leaving was the worst mistake. At the end of the post, there was an address, Colorado Springs. I stared at it for a long time before copying it down. Elizabeth didn't knock that night. She didn't whisper. She didn't fog the mirrors. That silence told me everything I needed to know. The house sat at the end of a dead street, charred black around the windows, like it had survived a fire that decided to stop halfway through. The yard was dead. No grass, no birds, no sound. I knocked. The opened immediately. The man who stood there looked older than his years, skin pale, eyes rimmed red like he hadn't slept in a decade. His hair was patchy, singed in places, as if he'd been too close to heat too often. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "She's already found me," I replied. He stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled of smoke and bleach. Every mirror had been shattered. The walls were scarred with burn marks, deliberate ones, symbols carved into the wood, then burned black. "She hates fire," he said, noticing my gaze. "Hates it until she needs it." His name was Thomas. He'd stayed in room 217 14 years ago. "She came home with me," he said, "just like she did with you." I told him everything, the guest book, the elevator, the message. When he finished, he nodded slowly. "She's stronger with you than she ever was with me." "Why?" I asked. "You listened," he said. "I fought." He showed me his hands, scarred, trembling. I tried to burn her away. Thought if I recreated the fire, I could trap her in it, make her finish what started. My stomach twisted. Did it work? She screamed for days. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly. Elizabeth was listening. "I thought I'd killed her," Thomas continued, "but you can't kill something that already knows how to survive pain." He pointed to a corner of the room. There was a shape there, not fully formed, just heat distortion in the air, a pressure. "She took pieces of me," he said quietly. "Sleep, time, faces. Sometimes I don't recognize myself in photos." A knock echoed through the house. Once. Thomas flinched. "She's angry," he whispered. "You brought her closer." "I need to end this," I said. He laughed, a broken sound. "There is no ending, only relocation." The knocking grew louder. Thomas grabbed my arm. "If she gives you a choice, don't take it. Choices are how she stays." The walls began to warm. Smoke seeped from the vents. "She's learned a new trick," he said, panic rising. "She's never done this before." The shape in the corner solidified. Elizabeth stepped forward. Her dress was pristine. Her eyes burned. "You were never grateful," she said to Thomas. "I gave you everything," he sobbed. She tilted her head. "You tried to erase me." Then she looked at me. "You understand me," she said. The house groaned. Fire crawled along the walls. Not real fire, not consuming, just enough to remind us how it feels to burn. "Come home," she said to me. "I'm tired of traveling." Thomas screamed. I ran. Behind me, the house erupted, not in flames, but in sound. Wood cracking, glass shattering, a roar like a furnace door opening. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because Elizabeth's voice was already in my head. "You can't save everyone," she whispered.
and you're running out of places to hide.
Elizabeth didn't speak to me for 3 days after Colorado Springs. No whispers, no knocks, no fogged mirrors. That silence was deliberate. It was the kind of quiet that follows a threat, the pause before something irreversible. I barely slept. I kept the lights on. I checked reflections before entering rooms, watched my shadow like it might move without me. On the 4th night, she returned, not with warmth, with cold. I was brushing my teeth when the bathroom lights dimmed. The mirror clouded instantly, as if someone had exhaled against it from the inside. I didn't wipe it away this time. I waited. Her words appeared slowly. "You can't carry me alone." My stomach clenched. "I didn't agree to this," I said aloud. The air behind me thickened. My reflection blurred, not vanished, just displaced. When she spoke, it wasn't from one direction. It came from the walls, the ceiling, the space inside my ribs. "You're tired," Elizabeth said. "I can feel it." "What do you want?" I whispered. A pause, then help. The word felt wrong in her voice, too small, too human. "You need to rest," she continued, "and I need room to breathe." The mirror cleared. I saw myself again, but behind me stood the outline of another person. "Bring someone," she said gently, "just for one night." My mouth drew dry. "No, she won't stay," Elizabeth promised. "She'll only listen." She. I felt sick. "No," I said again, louder this time. The knocking began, not 3 times, over and over, from every surface. "You think I'm cruel," Elizabeth said, her voice sharpening, "but I've only ever asked for what was given to me." I thought of Thomas, of the burned house, of names filling the guest book. "You don't need another person," I said. "You need to let go." Her presence surged. The temperature spiked. My bathroom tiles grew hot under my bare feet. "I did let go," she hissed. "They pulled me back." Images flooded my mind. Hands dragging her from flames, voices shouting, the hotel rebuilt around her pain like a monument. "I'm not asking again," she said. The next day, my sister called. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. "Hey," she said lightly, "I had the weirdest dream about you last night." My blood turned to ice. She described the Stanley Hotel without naming it. The long hallways, the laughter, a woman humming softly from behind a bathroom door. Elizabeth was reaching out. That night, I tried to destroy the guest book. It appeared on my kitchen table, already open. I poured lighter fluid over it. The pages absorbed nothing. They stayed dry. Elizabeth's voice came from behind me. "Fire doesn't hurt me anymore. It teaches." The book flipped to a blank page. A pen rolled across the table and stopped at my hand. A name was written in faint outline, as if waiting to be pressed harder. My sister's. I dropped the pen. "No," I said, shaking. "I won't do it." The knocking stopped. The apartment went completely still. Elizabeth knelt in front of me. She looked small. "I won't force you," she said. "I'll just wait." Her hand rested on my chest, right over my heart. "You're already opening doors. You just don't realize it yet."
When she vanished, the guest book vanished with her. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister. Thinking of visiting you next week. Hope that's okay. I stared at the screen. Behind me, something knocked. Once.
I didn't tell my sister not to come. That's the truth I hate the most. I could have lied, could have said I was sick, busy, out of town. Instead, I stared at her message for a long time and realized something ugly about myself. I was tired of running. If Elizabeth was going to take someone, I wanted it to end with me. I booked a flight to Denver that night. Elizabeth didn't stop me. She watched. The airport felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. Corridors stretched too long. Announcements echoed late, overlapping themselves. I caught my reflection in a dark window and saw the faint outline of her standing where my shadow should have been. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "I'm taking you back," I replied. Her smile was sad. "We never really leave." The drive to Estes Park felt shorter than it should have. The mountains closed in tighter this time, heavier, like they recognized me. When the Stanley Hotel came into view, my chest tightened, not with fear, but familiarity, like returning to a house you swore you'd never enter again. The lobby lights flickered as I stepped inside. The front desk clerk looked up and smiled. "Welcome back," she said. "I just arrived," I replied. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. "You never checked out." Room 217 was waiting. Same key, same hallway, same quiet. But the room itself felt awake. The air was warm. The lamps glowed without being turned on. The mirror in the bathroom was already fogged. I spoke before Elizabeth could. "You don't get to follow me anymore," I said. "This ends here." Her reflection formed slowly in the glass. "You brought yourself back," she replied. "That's how this place works." I laid out my plan, every desperate half-learned ritual I'd pieced together from archives, stories, Thomas's warnings. The Stanley wasn't just a hotel, it was a container, a wound built around her pain. If I anchored myself fully, if I stayed long enough, willingly, I could close the door behind me, bind her with me inside. "You want to be remembered?" I said. "Then remember me." The temperature dropped sharply. Elizabeth stepped out of the mirror. "You would stay?" she asked quietly. "Yes." I searched her face. No manipulation, no warmth, just truth. The walls began to shift. The hallway outside stretched, then folded inward. Doors rearranged themselves. The sounds of the hotel, footsteps, laughter, distant music, faded into something deeper, older. The guest book appeared on the desk. Blank. Elizabeth handed me the pen. "If you write your name, you won't leave." "I know." My hand shook as I pressed the pen to paper. The moment the ink touched the page, the hotel reacted. Lights flared, pipes screamed. Somewhere deep within the walls, something slammed shut, like a door being sealed for the first time in decades. Elizabeth gasped, not in pain, in surprise. "You're closing it," she whispered. "Stay with me, here, where you belong." Her face softened. For a moment I thought it had worked. Then the fire came back. Not heat, memory. The room filled with smoke that didn't burn lungs, but thoughts. I saw Elizabeth as she was, trapped, screaming, pulled from flames she didn't want to leave because the hotel had already claimed her. "You're not saving me," she said, her voice breaking. "You're replacing me." The guest book tore itself open. Names spilled across the pages, rewriting themselves, rearranging. My name wasn't closing the door, it was opening a new one. Elizabeth stepped back. "You don't belong here," she said suddenly. "You don't understand the cost." The walls cracked. The hotel groaned like something alive being wounded. I felt myself slipping, my reflection pulling away from me, my shadow stretching toward the mirror. "Leave," she urged urgently. "Now." "I won't let you take anyone else," I shouted. She looked at me with something like gratitude. Then she pushed me. I fell backward and woke up in the snow outside the Stanley Hotel, alone. My flight home was canceled. My sister's phone went straight to voicemail. And inside the hotel, room 217 went completely dark.
I didn't wake up relieved. I woke up empty. The snow around the Stanley Hotel was pristine, untouched except for the shallow outline of my body. No footprints led to me. No footprints led away. When I stood, the cold cut straight through my coat, sharp enough to remind me I was still real. The hotel behind me was dark, not closed, dark. No lights in the windows, no movement, just a massive white shape against the mountains, silent in a way that felt wrong, like a breath being held. I went inside. The lobby was unchanged, but stripped of warmth. No staff, no guests, no sound except my own footsteps echoing too loudly. The front desk clock was frozen at 2:17 a.m. Room 217 was sealed. The door was gone. Not locked, not boarded. Gone. In its place stood a smooth section of wall, wallpaper unbroken, as if the room had never existed. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No knocking. No humming, no warmth. Elizabeth was gone. For 3 days, nothing followed me. No soap, no fogged mirrors, no stretched hallways or exit signs. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, for the first time since Colorado. I started to believe the impossible had happened, that the hotel had closed its wound, that Elizabeth had stayed behind. Then, my sister called. "I made it home," she said. "Sorry I missed you. My flight got delayed. Weirdest thing, though." I held my breath. "I dreamed about a hotel," she laughed nervously. "Big old place in the mountains. Felt like I'd been there before." The silence between us stretched. "But it's silly. Just a dream, right?" After we hung up, I checked the mirrors. They stayed clear. That's when I understood the truth. Elizabeth didn't need to follow me anymore. She didn't need knocking or messages or fear. The hotel wasn't a prison. It was an anchor, and anchors can be lifted. I started seeing new articles online. Guests reporting warmth in cold rooms, soap appearing on sinks, children laughing in empty halls, a woman humming softly in places she didn't belong. Not just in Colorado, New York, Chicago, Seattle, hotels, hospitals, airports, anywhere people wait. Elizabeth learned to travel without me, and I taught her how. That's why I'm writing this, not as a warning, not as an apology, as a record, because the guest book is gone, but something else has replaced it. Stories. Stories are lighter. Stories spread. If you ever stay somewhere old, somewhere proud of its history, and you feel watched, don't listen. If the room feels warm when it shouldn't, don't thank it. If you smell soap that doesn't belong to you, leave it untouched. And if someone asks you to stay just one more night, don't. Because Elizabeth doesn't want to be alone, and she's learned that people are easier to carry than buildings. I don't know how long I have left before she comes back for me, not to haunt, not to punish, but to finish what we started. Sometimes at 2:17 a.m., I still hear a knock. Just one, polite, patient, like someone waiting to be let in. If you hear it too, don't answer. And if you ever visit the Stanley Hotel, look closely at the walls. Room 217 isn't gone. It's just learning how to move.